And, we can fall on hard times. We might lose our jobs. We might have health issues, and it doesn't reflect on who we are as people. And equally, our dogs, can fall on hard times as a result of their owner falling on hard times. And it's not a reflection on their personality or their health situation either.
Welcome to episode 24 of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Muir, and this is your one-stop shop for the knowledge and advice you need to adopt that rescue dog of your dreams and then integrate them into your home. I'm very excited to share with you today a conversation I had with Dr. Alex Avery. He is a veterinarian based in New Zealand. He's also the host of the Call the Vet podcast, so you can check him out on any of your podcast platforms there. And also the founder of a popular YouTube channel called Our Pets Health. And he offers just this really great laid-back vet perspective on rescue dogs. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Alex Avery. Welcome, Dr. Alex Avery. Thank you for joining me with this rendition of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm so excited to get a vet's perspective.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Bethany. Thanks for having me on. It's a really, really important topic I think we're going to discuss today and that you talk about in general. So I'm excited to get stuck into it.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about your current work as a vet and, if you specialize in anything in particular or you have any certain interest in the field of veterinary medicine?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a vet in general practice. I graduated from the UK, as you can probably tell with my accent, in 2006 it was. So yeah, a little bit of time ago, and I'm getting the grey hairs that show that time has passed. But I've been in general practice since the very beginning. I was in mixed practice to start with, but have been just companion animals, so our dogs and cats, for the last 12 years or so. And currently working in New Zealand. So I'm in the clinic 4 days a week. So I'm very much a vet in practice. And no, I mean, I'm a jack of all trades. So I guess I enjoy the variety that comes with the job, the consultations, the medical stuff, as well as, the surgery and the dentistry and everything else that we see, every day in the vet clinic. So that's my, I guess, professional role. And then kind of my side role, if you like, is that I've kind of launched ourpetshealth.com, which is an online platform just to try and give pet parents out there a good source of evidence-based information that they can trust so that they can make the best decisions that are right for their pet and their family, because what's right for one person is not right for the next person. And there's a lot of bad information out there online and in forums and things like that. So I wanted to kind of add my 2 cents to the online world as well.
Yeah, that's certainly admirable. There is a lot online that should stand to be counteracted. So, yeah, that's a hard thing with pet owners, right? There's a trust that has to be built no matter where you're coming from. But I feel like vets in particular have an uphill climb in that regard, that there's maybe sometimes a bit of a misunderstanding as to where vets are coming from and that it's not as profitable a business as they might think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole lot in that statement,
Yeah.
Isn't there? But yeah, I guess it's important to say as well that it's the minority that shout the loudest. So most, pet parents have a fantastic relationship with their vets, and it's one that I think is an incredibly important thing to have and to focus on, and not be chopping and changing and just price shopping. It's finding someone that you can trust so that you can work together, and it's important that your vet trusts you as well. So it goes both ways. So yeah, I think most of the time people are, coming at it from the right angle as well, in that we all just want to do what's best for our pet, whether they're a dog or a cat, whether they're a new addition, a new adoption, or whether they've been in as part of our family for years and years. We're all coming from a place of wanting to do the best. It's just sometimes the people imparting the advice maybe don't have the experience or the knowledge to fully appreciate what you're going through.
Yes, for sure. So, do you have any rescue pets, or have you had any rescue pets of your own?
So at the moment, I've got two cats, and we got them as kittens from a vet that we work with. In the past, yes, we've had a couple of rescue cats. So we had Stella, who was a wee kitten who had some pretty significant damage to one of her front legs. Came into the clinic, and we couldn't find a home for her, so I ended up bringing her back home. And then Pino, who was found in a box by the river when my wife went for a run one morning, and all of these cute ginger fluff balls came crawling out of this box at her, and we ended up keeping him as
Was it a
well.
wine box?
Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of box it was,
No,
but yeah,
okay.
well, Pinot is it's the kind of the wine of New Zealand, I guess, the red
Yeah.
wine of New Zealand. So,
Okay, that's fair.
and he was a ginger cat. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a tenuous link there. Um, yeah, so we've had those when we kind of moved overseas, because we've moved a little bit. We didn't feel it was in their best interest for them to come with us, so we actually then rehomed them to friends of ours who were looking for adding pets to their own family. So it was an ideal situation to do what was right, right by them as well.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly, rehoming is a way to get pets, right? And other than just through rescuing, right? Getting them through a dog rescue, but rehoming them. My first dog came from actually my mom's congregation member. She's a minister, and she actually was doing a funeral for the person who owned this dog, and so ended up taking home this 9-year-old beagle or something, and we all fell in love. So rehoming is certainly not a bad option, right? And when it comes down to it, and it's kind of
Yeah.
cool when you know what the pet's personality is like, what their behaviors are like, to be able to share those things and then find them the most accurate home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a way of. I mean, it's exactly the same as adoption, I guess, except you're not going through the shelter or the rescue center. It's straight from source, if you like. And I think, yeah, the senior person who's sadly passed away and their older pet, they're often some of the most vulnerable pets and the hardest for shelters. I would imagine your experience
Yeah,
may attest to that. They're the hardest pets to rehome successfully.
certainly. So, I guess from your opinion as a vet, when you're dealing with different dogs in the clinic, do you find that you notice many differences between purebred dogs versus rescue dogs?
In some ways, yes. In a lot of ways, no. I guess the first thing I'd say is that a lot of rescue dogs that I see are purebred dogs. So maybe they were a little bit too much, or the previous owner's situation has changed. So we see a whole range of different breeds as rescues. I guess some of the behavioral problems that they come with are real, and we'll have some that have not been socialized as well. That's certainly something that seems to be apparent more in the last few years, just because with the pandemic and lockdown and things like that, the opportunities for socialization were not fantastic. And by socialization, I mean exposure to all of the different sights and sounds and stimulus that a dog would normally come across in their daily life. And while you can teach an older dog to be perfectly comfortable with these, it just takes a lot more effort than when you're dealing with a puppy in those first few weeks, months of life, when I kind of like to say their brain is like a sponge, and they're just accepting all of these things as normal, and learning that, hey, that's fine, I don't need to get worried about that, or I'm a little bit anxious about this, but I'm going to learn the coping strategy so that I can use that later on. So I guess we've had a bit of problem with that. But as far as health situations go, not a huge number of differences, apart from, I mean, with the purebred dogs, I guess if we're thinking about purebred and mixed breed dogs, is that purebred dogs, there are a lot of known genetic problems. Certain breeds are inherently going to get certain conditions, or if they're not going to get them, but they're going to be more likely to get them. And so it's just being aware that could be the case. But I think from the point of view of, rescue versus dogs that people have had from a puppy, there's mostly similarities rather than differences.
Yeah, which may be surprising to some. I did a nail trimming event once where I was trimming dog nails that were either, they could be rescue dogs, they could be purebred dogs. And I think people might have the inclination to think that the rescue dogs were going to be harder to trim nails on, and it actually kind of ended up being the opposite. But I'm not saying purebred dogs are bad or that they're not well behaved. It's just that sometimes we have the tendency to put that on rescue dogs, that they're likely to have issues, or they're likely to be not good companions. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's you're kind of molded by your experiences in life, and our dogs are very much the same. If they're, I like to say there's no such thing as a badly behaved dog. It's a poorly trained dog or a poorly socialized dog, and it's not their fault. They're not inherently nasty or scared or anxious or likely to bite. It's just the experiences that they've had. And I think a rescue dog is no more or no less likely to have had those experiences that a purebred dog or a dog who's been with one family from 8 weeks of age. It's the effort that was put into them, and like I say, all rescue dogs, they may have come, and the vast majority will have come from from loving homes. Like your story of that elderly owner who passed away. That they didn't love their dog any less.
mm-hmm.
So that rescue, could have been perfectly sound in every single way, health wise, behavior wise. You just don't know. And we can fall on hard times. We might lose our jobs. We might have health issues, and it doesn't reflect on who we are as people. And equally, our dogs, can fall on hard times as a result of their owner falling on hard times. And it's not a reflection on their personality or their health situation either.
Yeah, certainly they're not always in that scenario because of behavior issues. There's numerous reasons why people rehome their dogs, and it's almost never that they don't love them anymore.
No, exactly. Yeah.
What would your biggest health concerns be when it comes to someone adopting a rescue dog? Is there specific things you might have dog adopters watch out for?
I think we need to, and this is maybe going to depend on where you get your dog from, what how, I guess, open the shelter is, or where they are of that dog's previous situation. But I always think, and I guess it's more behaviorally, because often the health problems are fairly self-apparent. If the dog's limping because of arthritis, then we're going to know that. If they've got bad skin disease, then that's fairly evident. If they've got diarrhea, then clearly you're going to see that. But it's just thinking, are they good with children and with other pets, I guess, is the biggest concern. We have lots of people have got young kids, and that's when they're thinking about also bringing a pet into their life to become part of the family. So it's just taking things slowly, making sure that the introductions are done in a very controlled manner, asking questions about that history, because it may well be that that knowledge is there, it just has been forgotten to be mentioned to you. So just being a little bit cautious and taking things one step at a time, and not going, oh well, we're going to just introduce you for 10 minutes, everything seems fine, then let the toddler run wild with your dog, and they end up hanging off their tail or their ears, and then we get a really unfortunate bite incident or something like that, which is no fault of the dog, but they're the ones that pay a pretty serious price for that if it does happen.
Yes. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think sometimes families can have the hardest time adopting dogs, because that is the thing to be cautious about, and not knowing what that dog's exposure might be to children. And on the dog rescues part, it's a bit difficult to test that out, or understand where that dog's been or what their experiences have been. So it's definitely something I find people need to be cautious with. And I actually made a course about pet friendly kids, because a huge part of that is the parents and the dog owner's role to facilitate those introductions and all those every single interaction that your child has with a pet, right?
Yeah, and just learning to read your dog's body language as well. I mean, which is, if you've had dogs all your life, you may be aware of, what those subtle signs are. But equally, I find a lot of people, they don't pick up on those subtle cues. And I'm sure you've seen videos on, Instagram and Facebook and things of, kids cuddling dogs, and this dog is showing every single warning sign they possibly could. And people are laughing, going, oh, look, he's smiling, or, he's loving it. And really, they are being incredibly well restrained. So it's just, learning to read your body language and taking things slowly.
Yeah, and not require that touching means bonding, like your kids don't have to touch your dog to be bonded with them, and start out to, give them more space than you might think necessary, at least to start, and until you better understand your dog. But of course, every pet owner needs to better understand body language overall.
Yeah. And it's easy for us to say, because we'll see, we see tens of dogs every day in the clinic. So, we get that inherent understanding, and it's, you can pretty quickly learn to, to read a dog, because ultimately if we don't, then we get bitten as well. And, thankfully, I think that's happened twice in my career of, 15, 16 years. So, we learn to read dogs pretty quickly. But when you've only had one dog your whole life, who's maybe never expressed that behavior or shown that sign, when you get a new dog, it's not something that we inherently pick up on.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So, as in Canada, there are a lot of less than reputable dog breeders. I assume that might be the scenario in New Zealand as well. I wonder if you have any recommendations for people who choose the path of getting a dog from a reputable breeder. What would some signs be of a reputable breeder?
Yeah, so that's it's a huge problem. I guess over here we're fortunate in the sense that there doesn't seem to be a lot of kind of puppy farms, puppy mills, that are churning out huge numbers of dogs. Certainly when I was in the UK, that is a big problem. There's lots of dogs coming from all different sources, and it can be very, very challenging sometimes to know what that background is. So there's lots of tricks that people will play. They will, they'll rent Airbnbs so that they've got a lovely family home. They will, that looks great. There might be a few kids knocking around, but then, a week later, if you tried to go back there, it would be, someone else on their holidays, if you like. It's how interested is that breeder in you? Because most reputable breeders have a very long waiting list. So you're not going to get a dog for the next litter, probably, maybe, it might be 2 years waiting list. That's certainly not unheard of. And that's a sign that, that they're doing things properly, I guess. Are they asking you as many questions as you're asking them? Because a good breeder wants to know that their puppy is going to a home that is a suitable environment, be that exercise wise, whatever it is they're looking at, size wise, how big's your back garden. If you're looking for a big breed dog, being in a small apartment is probably not going to be ideal. And they just want that successful outcome, because they don't want their puppies to end up in shelters and in rescue situations. So are they asking as many questions as you are? Even little things like avoiding Craigslist and all that kind of thing, because they are, a big red flag in the majority of cases. A lot of good breeders will have, pretty fancy websites, although they're equally pretty quick and cheap to put together as well. If you are looking at adverts, then actually just kind of Googling the telephone number, because what you might find is that telephone number comes up with multiple different breeds or multiple different areas, and that would be a big red flag that actually they're just using that number to get rid of a whole load of different puppies. And then never meeting by the side of the road to pick up your puppy. Unfortunately, that happens all the time. It's something that I've seen multiple times, and it may be that 2, 3, 4 hours later you're having to take your puppy to the vet because they've got parvovirus, is the classic one. But it's we do things because we want to bring a new life into our family, but there's definitely a number of pitfalls to avoid.
Yes, that's very true. We do have a pretty strong puppy mill situation in Ontario, Canada. So it's something we're constantly fighting against, is the instant gratification of being able to, just look up that whatever dog, whatever breed you want on Kijiji here, and then just go find it in the town over and bring it home that same day. Whereas, those reputable breeders are likely not going to have that litter available for a season, for multiple seasons, right? That's going to take some time, and you're going to be behind some other people who got there before you. And that is likely a person who's doing things the right way and planning out their litters and not mass producing dogs.
Yeah, because you don't want to be producing, a litter from every season for a particular dog either. I guess from a rescue point of view and an adoption point of view as well. Another thing that I've seen and heard is happening more and more, certainly in the UK, where there's lots of rescue dogs in inverted commas coming from overseas, from Eastern European countries, or that's the claimed story, but actually they are breeding these puppies and then they're just putting a backstory behind that litter to say these have been rescued from Romania or Poland or wherever it might be, but actually they're being produced at puppy farms in in the next county or over in Ireland or somewhere else, and they're being produced for rescues. So a sob story goes a long way, and it's very difficult for people because they'll also turn up and they might realize that this isn't the ideal situation, this isn't how things should be done, but then they are loath to leave a puppy in the environment that they find them in because it might not be very clean. It might be that they recognize that these dogs need to get out of that situation, but unfortunately by going through with that purchase, you are funding organized crime effectively, and you're funding these puppy farms. So it takes a very hard heart, and I appreciate how difficult it is to actually act on what I'm saying, but to say no, this isn't right, walk away, and maybe give the local SPCA or whatever your authority is a call to say there is some neglect going on and I've got some welfare concerns, so that can be investigated.
Yeah, it would be a hard situation to pass up rescuing that dog from that scenario, right? But at the same time, it is cyclical, and if you keep buying dogs from there, you're feeding into the puppy mill's need for buyers, right? You're feeding the demand for those puppies, and that is what keeps them going.
Yeah, and they prey on people's emotions as well. And it's all very well to say, well, next time I won't do that, but that next time's not going to be for 15 years. So that's irrelevant to those people selling that litter at that time.
Well, and think about the mom that's still there and still pumping out puppies and probably not getting the veterinary care that she probably needs either.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not getting any kind of care, veterinary or social or anything. It's a pretty grim life these dogs lead, unfortunately.
Yes. Some dog adopters might be quite concerned about the financial implications behind adopting a dog and having a dog for the first time in their lives. And I wondered if you could maybe speak to veterinary costs and why that's something that they should be thinking about prior to getting their first dog.
Yeah, sure. So the cost of healthcare for a dog can vary hugely. So I think if anyone's bringing a dog into their life, then in my mind they need to be able to cover the absolute basics, and by that I mean you need to be able to feed your dog, cover them for any preventives that they need. So in your part of the world, I'm not sure in Canada where you are, if heartworms are a regular risk, but ticks are prevalent. Do we need to have anti-tick treatment? Vaccinations are definitely a consideration. So we spoke then about parvovirus in puppies, and it's a very real threat across the whole world, no matter where you are. So having that core vaccination is crucial for keeping them healthy, and then the regular checks going forwards. What then becomes a little bit harder is predicting those health costs as a dog is growing or in older age. And that's going to depend a little bit on breed, on size of dog. If you choose to adopt a large Labrador or a Bull Mastiff or something, then the costs of providing healthcare, even the most basic healthcare, can be significantly more expensive than a small breed dog. And so that should be something that we need to factor into our decisions. when it comes to common injuries and common diseases, if you are looking for a purebred dog, then certain breeds are more prone to developing problems. So Cavalier King Charles is highly likely to develop heart failure as they get older. A West Highland White Terrier gets allergic skin disease. A Labrador, they will more often than not, get arthritis. So what are the costs involved with those? And while those costs up front might not be a huge bill, they add up to thousands of dollars sometimes a year, depending again on the size and breed of your dog. So that's something to consider. I guess the other thing to think about with healthcare costs, and it's the ones that we all hear about, is those accidental costs or those sudden illnesses that, where either your dog will need a prolonged period of hospitalization or they'll need a surgery to fix a broken leg, for example. And they can, be very significant, and they can be out of reach if we haven't done any planning on how we're going to be able to afford that. So, it's difficult for me in New Zealand to say, what the costs are in North America, but, you're talking about multiples of thousands of dollars in some cases. If it's a slip disc and your dog needs back surgery because they're a dachshund, you're probably talking $8,000 to $10,000. I would hazard a guess, something, in that figure. So, how can we think about providing for that level of care? I guess what I am cautious of is, and I hear it a lot from people within the profession, but also pet parents out there, is that if you can't afford these costs, then you shouldn't have a dog. And that's something that I really disagree with strongly. I don't think people need to be able to afford this very top level care, because I think that puts an unattainable onus on the vast majority of people out there to ever have a dog in their life. And I think that the benefit of having a dog and the benefit to these dogs of being in a loving family is huge. And we don't want to end up with a situation where we expect more from our pets' healthcare than we do from our own healthcare. I hear stories of people not able to afford insulin for their own diabetes. So how can we then say that unless you can afford it for your dog, you can't have them? I think that's wrong. Equally, I think it's important that we don't blame vets for these costs. The quality of care that we're able to provide for our pets it's changed hugely in the last 5, 10 years, 15 years since I've been a vet. If I think back to my early days, what was available then and now it's completely chalk and cheese. But with that increase comes an increased level of complexity and training and skills needed from the vets involved. And also the equipment is horrendously expensive sometimes. We've been looking at a new, some new orthopedic equipment, and you're talking 6, 7, 8,000 to get a single piece of equipment. It's, so don't blame your vet for these costs. And being aware that there are other options. But thinking ahead, so do you have enough income to have a savings account? So can you save up and have an emergency fund? That's fantastic if it's built up to a level that is high enough to cover the costs. Unfortunately, sometimes accidents happen in that first few weeks or months of having a dog. And if you don't have a decent savings account, then that's not going to help them at that time. And that's where things like insurance come in. Which is something that is, I think, very important to consider for all pet parents. And there's a huge different style of policy that's available. It might be that it's only the accident that covers the broken leg, and it doesn't cover these long-term sicknesses, arthritis, diabetes, that kind of thing. Equally, you can get comprehensive policies that will pay upwards of $15,000, $20,000 and will cover absolutely everything under the sun. Clearly, those premiums are going to be higher, but I guess it's planning ahead and having an understanding that some of those costs might be coming, and how are you going to afford those, or what kind of standard and level of treatment are you going to want and be able to afford for your dog? And just have that planning so that when it does happen, it's going to be an emotional time, but hopefully finance and the potential guilt of having to make decisions based on finance is lessened.
Yeah, and that's often what dog rescues are looking for, is just that you have a plan in regards to a lot of things. If you break up with your partner, what's the plan with the dog? Or are they going to be tossed to the side? Or, when it comes to veterinary care or unforeseen costs with your pet, do you have a plan? And if having a plan will make you feel better, but also really help you get through that application process as well.
Yeah, and it just makes life a lot easier if we think ahead, and we don't rush into any decisions, and we have a plan. It just makes life so much easier, and it's going to be much more likely that you'll have a successful relationship, and hopefully you're never going to need to act on that plan, and you're never going to have any health concerns of significance. But it is a reality for a minority of dogs ultimately, but it would be wrong to say, well, it's never going to happen, so I don't need to plan.
Yeah, exactly. Best to be over prepared than under prepared.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today to talk about rescue dogs. And I think it's really helpful to have your opinion on the matter. And I'm really glad to have found you and be able to share your take on all of this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been a good chat of some really important things for people to have a think about, for sure.
Well, that just about wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you found it useful, definitely give me a shout out in your Instagram or your Facebook story. My handle is @Pawdoption and make sure to hit subscribe so that you get updated when new episodes air. If you would like to reach out to Dr. Alex Avery or find out more about him, you can check out his Call the Vet podcast, or you can also check out his YouTube channel called Our Pets Health, and the links to those will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead.